It's late. It's my fault. I need a Red Bull. I'm not good at this thing unless I get a Red Bull. But hello, everybody. I'm Ryan,
I'm Monica.
and she's freezing up. So let's go to our intro. Oh, so I had to redo the intro. I think I need to extend it a little bit, but because I needed to tighten it up a little bit. But how's everything going?
All right.
Yeah? Those headphones look good on you. So
They're
why don't you tell
navy.
everybody what we're talking about tonight?
They're navy like my office. We're talking about
Um,
annoying husbands.
you talk about annoying husbands all the time.
We're talking about therapy, couples therapy, but separately.
Couples therapy, but separately. Keep going.
Being that when couples are in therapy but not together, they've decided to pursue therapy on their own for their own personal journeys, and that would help to better their relationship in the end just by default.
Okay. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about how it pertains to us? Get deep. Get deep. Get real. Give the people what they want. We need the drama. We need the blood. We need the guts. Let's go.
What in particular?
Oh, come on. Tell them about what led us to therapy. If you want me to talk, I'm going to talk. I don't worry. Don't worry. I'll lay it all out.
So Ryan relied on a therapist to get him through some rough mental struggles. Can we say that?
Nope. Back up.
Okay.
Back up. All of it. They're like, okay, you're skipping to the part that we're here to talk about, but how did we get there? Let's go. Let it out.
You want me to tell everyone that you were crazy?
Yes, go ahead. I have no problem with you telling people I was crazy. I think I say it on this podcast all the time. I think tell people I was crazy, or am crazy still, but crazier.
You were a very intense roller coaster ride, like the one that everybody wants to go on but doesn't want to go on when they're at Six Flags or Hershey Park or Disney. Like you kind of want to know what it's about, but you really don't want to be on it because it's just up and down, your stomach's in knots all the time. That was you.
What else?
So at your core, you have beautiful qualities. And
okay, Monica's doing a very bad job at this. Okay, so long story short.
Well, then be specific about what you want.
Let's go back to the year 2000 and... Is it 19 already? 2018, 2019?
Yeah, 2018. Well, there's, before that too, but okay. 2017.
So let's go back. So I did have a number of mental health issues that I was not addressing. Overwhelming, crippling anxiety. And some of you that are listening to this might be like, what? Like you?
Like, no, you didn't know it was anxiety, remember?
Well, I did. You're right. I didn't know it was anxiety, but people might be like, people who work with me because I, was fine at work or at the gym or whatever. They're like, what? No, not you. Like, you talk to everybody. Like, you talk about their problems. Like, you give advice. You had problems, serious problems that I, like Monica just said, was refusing to address. And of course, it bled into our marriage, and I would cause a number of arguments. And so that went on from probably when Monica and I met, which was 2016. I'm very bad at the years. I'm not bad at the dates. I'm bad at the years. It's like 2016.
14. 15.
15. So like 2015 to like 2018. So can you imagine like that long hanging in there
19
for the husband that you... No, not 19. Like, we could go back and forth in the years, but 2020 was the worst year ever. 2019 was the good year. 2018 is when things started to come back together. All right? You can agree?
Yes.
Okay, so I hit rock bottom mentally. Mentally hit rock bottom.
Wait, literally, because you moved into the basement.
I moved into the basement for like a week or 2 weeks. Like, things were bad. Things were really bad. And I was at work like all weekend. I think it was like all weekend we spent away. I had to stay there all weekend, which happened a lot when I was in New York. So had to stay there all weekend. That Sunday had an epiphany that I had to start working on things, that I had to get some help. And that's when I started to address some of the things that were going on inside of my head with I can't use the term doctor because he's not a doctor, but he is a counselor. He is my master Yoda, John Anthony, and he is an emotional counselor. And his style worked for me. I didn't want to go to somebody that I didn't know. I didn't want to go to somebody that gives you well, tell me how you're feeling. How does that make you feel? I wanted somebody who could give me tools to use in my everyday life, but would also call me out on my bullshit when he's like, nah, no, 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 no. What you mean to say is that you're at fault, like stuff like that. Okay, so that worked for me. Long story short, so I started seeing John Anthony, worked out some things with a therapist in regards to medication, and then I started to feel worlds better, and our marriage got better. Remember, right? And Monica and I are very big believers about positive energy, positive outcome. So shortly after I started to put the pieces back together and started taking ownership and all of those fun things, there was a surprise. Double dose. What was it?
Dos babies.
Dose babies. So again, going back to positive energy, the babies, the twins, were conceived shortly after I started to put things back together in my own head. And I am a firm believer that therapy is just like anything else. You have to get your reps in, you have to stay on it. Even when you don't feel like going, you have to go. And here we are in the year 2021. We survived the pandemic. We survived some job changes. We've survived 3 kids, 4 kids. We survived everything else that was going on. So,
The first night after twins.
The first night after twins, which was like the worst, maybe one of the worst nights of my life. Not the twins itself, but that was tough. That was tough. So anyway, but you saw the difference, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So it affected our marriage in a positive manner, and we rolled with that. And I'm going to jump ahead and speak for Monica very quickly. She doesn't like when people speak for her, but I'm going to speak for her because I can already tell she's going to have some trouble acknowledging this. Fast forward to the fall of 20. It was still 2020, right? We're getting the years all mixed up. Sorry, everybody. As you know, it's been a long 2 years. So fast forward to the year 2020, the fall of 2020. Monica realized that it was time for her to take a hold of some of the things that were going on inside her head. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about that?
So actually, I started going to therapy for myself when you were going through some of your darkest roller coaster times, where I was just please someone help me. I felt alone because I'm not somebody who typically reaches out for help. I felt alone because I'm not someone who just divulges all of my thoughts and feelings. I myself don't even consider my own thoughts and feelings a lot. I just roll through. So I did go when you were in some of your darkest times, so that she could help. And she did. And then I became, then we got into a good space, and it wasn't like, oh, I'm good now, thanks, see you later. But we had Jade. I was working full time. I was pregnant with twins, so I had different doctor's appointments and all of that. So it just didn't work into my schedule. And I will say one thing that has come out of COVID that has been super convenient is Zoom meetings, because now I'm able to meet even with 3 kids at home, and thinking that scheduling for something like that would be difficult. Now your schedule is different, so you are home more, so that I would be more available to go attend things in person. But having the opportunity to just squeeze it in after the kids go to bed and do a Zoom call for my therapy has been great, and I hope those stick around. So I did go back after the long year of COVID, and just it wasn't about you even this time. It wasn't about our marriage, because I felt confident in the place where that was, but it was about just going through with somebody some things that were going on in my head that were affecting me as a person. And as we all know, when things affect you as a person, it has tentacles that reach outward towards other areas of your life. And sometimes people let it affect their work or let it affect their marriage. And in this case, it wasn't affecting either of those things, but it had the potential to, because I was having also a very stressful work year this past year. So it was a decision that I made for myself and continue to pursue every 2 weeks and get the most that I can out of it, which I feel like I really have been embracing it, where I'm not a person who often discusses my own feelings, thoughts, emotions, and works through them. I'm more of a barrier, if you will. And my therapist likes to call those protectors. My protectors come out and start fighting whenever
So
I
why don't you
have feelings.
so why don't you tell everybody a little bit, because you're the prime example, in my opinion, of somebody who it was, and I'm speaking from your partner's standpoint, be honest with everybody. I kind of had to pry it out of you. There was arguing on your end, which is fine. There was arguing on my end when I needed it. But you, I believe, are an example, or you are definitely, are a shining example and can be an example for moms and teachers and everybody like that. So what I'm trying to say is that, why don't you speak a little bit to how hard it actually was for you to say, like, fuck, I got to start taking care of some shit. Like, be honest, like, be brutally honest how hard it was. And it was tough. It was tough. But when you got there, that's when you started to get better.
Well, I know myself, and I know that I don't often show emotion. For example, some people cry on a dime and have all that. I was crying a lot. Now, I also had to consider things like hormones after having two babies and things like that. But I just felt different about the way that I was feeling. And I think that was one of my signs to fix the way that I was handling my own emotions and feelings, which the way to fix them was to release them for me, because I don't typically talk about thoughts and feelings like that. So having a neutral party, somebody who wasn't invested in the outcome, either way, whatever path I chose, was somewhere where I felt safe to do that. Because we all have those friends and we have those confidence that we talk to, when people who understand our situation. And I think that that's still great, and I still do that. I do it every day with friends at work. But having somebody who was neutral in the situation, who didn't really know you, who was getting to know me, was really in it to kind of listen to my thoughts and feelings, be a neutral party to sit and bounce things back and say, well, how do you think that made this person feel or that person feel? So the benefit of that was something that I wouldn't be able to find in someone who was a friend or something of that sort.
And now you feel better. And now what are some of the things that you're getting out of therapy? And I think that we both agree about this, because even though you see a licensed therapist and I see somebody who's not necessarily a licensed therapist, but a counselor who has built what I believe is an outstanding program that works for me, we both always talk about our tools. And even when we start to get that friction and we start to argue, will say, like, well, my therapist says this, and this is the tool I need to use. Or this is what my counselor said, and this is the boundary that I'm putting into place, right? So we start to use those tools or lessons that we've been taught through our therapists and counselors, and we start to apply them, but like verbally, like we'll say it. We're not just like, we
Yeah.
won't try to like act it out, like play charades. It's like, no. This is what I discussed in counseling. This is my boundary, and maybe not yelling, maybe yelling, I don't know. And this is where I'm at, right? But I think one of the most important things, or one of the most beneficial things that come out of both of us seeing counseling, is that we both kind of know the bullet points, if you will, like the parameters of counseling, right? Like the main points, and that helps us both ease off the gas in the midst of an argument or a disagreement or whatever the case may be. Does that make sense? Does that sound fair? Like, we're both kind of like, okay, all right, that's your boundary. Okay, fine. Okay, I got it. Cool.
Right. I do think that using a therapist to better understand myself, for example, things like my own attachment style from how I was raised to how I'm now raising my kids, and recognizing things that I don't want to bring with me in my own parenting relationship with my kids. I may not have really outwardly realized those things had I not really broke those down,
That's a big one.
So and everybody has that. That's not just anybody who is having a particular issue in their family. You can go back and look. There's like all kinds of a different attachment styles. So you can go back and look at them all and say, like, well, I do appreciate this about that, but I don't appreciate that, and I wish it were different. And I want to make sure that I bring that difference into my own children's childhood. So that was a nice breaking point for me, because my ultimate goal is to be the best parent that I can be to our kids, and to take the good and the bad and learn from both from my own childhood. So putting those things into perspective. I also learned about how I function as a human being based off of some of those attachment theories, or based off of some of my history and my past. I learned why I do things the way that I do them, and where they can be beneficial and where they are harmful in certain areas, and how to be aware of those things so that when they do come up, I realize, okay, this is this part of me. My therapist speaks in parts. So she says, I hear this part saying, and I hear this part saying, because then you are dividing out feelings into parts rather than just one as a whole. And that way you can better explain the pieces of the puzzle of who you are by dividing them into these parts. And that way you can recognize that part, and you can celebrate it if it needs to be celebrated, or quiet down that part. But if you're just addressing a person as a whole, you're not going to be able to quiet down that whole person, because some of those parts belong there. For example, one of my parts is a protector. So naturally, when things come in that are hard for me, my protectors go up, kind of like my gloves go on, and I either block things out or I become in defense. So sometimes those protectors are absolutely necessary, and sometimes those protectors cause further issues. So it's been nice for me to recognize which is which. But some of those other things, like, being a child of divorce, and some of the things that would happen in my childhood, some of those protectors in my past, or the way that my disposition is, kept me on the path of, I could have been a child who rebelled and did drugs and let my anger and outlets in those areas, but my protectors helped me to choose a different way. So that's why they are good in certain circumstances and sometimes harmful in others.
I was going to say, so as far as harmful of others, so why don't you tell everybody about, and then we'll start talking a little bit more about my therapy, if you will, but why don't you tell everybody about how I would ask you things, being as curious as I am? And if any of you didn't know that I'm curious, if the 3 podcasts and the 10,000 posts I make a day for my page weren't enough, we're going to tell you right now, I'm a very curious person. So I would ask Monica about, like, oh, what did you do when this happened when you were 12? What did you do when this happened when you were 16? And Monica would be like, I can't remember. But why don't you tell everybody about, because this is very beneficial, I believe, and goes to the point that therapists and counselors can really help us dig out things that we didn't know were still there. Why don't you tell everybody what you realized with your therapist about you not being able to remember anything from your childhood?
I instantly, when something, we'll say, bad happens, or one of these protectors, like I was just talking about, comes in, cuts it off, blocks it down, buries it, and it's gone. So I don't attach emotions and feelings to things in the past, or I haven't there, because my protectors came in and cut it off at the knees and said, nope, you're not going to feel this. You're just going to push this down, and you're going to go to your practical side of you, and you're going to go to that checkbox that you have, and you're going to start checking off the list what you need to do in order to move on. So yes, I can be very resilient in that way, but
I'm going to stop you real quick.
Hold on. I never attached emotion to a lot of these things that have happened in my past because I didn't allow myself to. Therefore, I don't remember a lot of chunks of pieces of time.
Anything.
I remember something.
So, you remember? You remember your birthday? That's for sure.
You don't.
No, September 20th.
You're playing with me.
September 20th.
22nd.
I knew it. September 22nd, and we met on September 2nd.
Correct.
Okay, so yes, and I think one of the things that my counselor helped me realize was that I was pointing a lot of blame for no reason. It was me that needed to get control of things, need to take responsibility. If you follow me on Facebook or follow my page, you know that everything is extreme ownership. Now, this is long before Jocko and Leif came into the picture and Echelon Front. So I needed to, like I said, I needed to work with somebody who was going to be like, nah, it's you. You're the problem, right? And I think one of the reasons that John Anthony and I work so well together is because, and you can attest to this, remember everybody was a problem but me, right? It didn't matter who they were. If I knew them, what was going on, I would just be judgmental. I would just be negative, and everybody was a problem but me. But John wouldn't let me do that, would he? He'd be like, nope. He'd be like, you are in control of yourself. You are in control of you. Nobody else is responsible for what is going on inside your head or the actions that you are taking. And
yes, one of your biggest lines always was, well, whatever I did made you do it. And I'm like, I was just reacting to what you already did.
And relentless. I was relentless. Like, tell everybody how relentless. Like, all right, so let's be real for a second, because we're talking about how you and I were in therapy. Like, and perhaps some of you can relate, and if you can, that's perfectly fine. That's why we're doing this episode. Like, all night long arguments, right? Like, both of us. You're hard-headed, I'm hard-headed, till like 6 a.m. long arguments. And we haven't done that since both you and I have been in therapy. We're both much more in control of our emotions. But yeah, so I think the one thing that you realized, among other things, was that you were dealing with trauma, that you had subconscious trauma, that you didn't want to recognize it, and you started working on it. For me, it was that I need to start taking responsibility. I was worrying about things that didn't even happen, that may never happen, that ended up not happening.
Which we then later recognized as anxiety.
And I had a long commute that didn't help with the matter, because I would have tons of time to listen to music and think about things. So, and we had a few losses in the family that year, so it was rough. So I was just thinking. But to go back to what we were talking about, subconsciously, trauma, and what I was getting out of working with John Anthony, is that I thought I was good. I did not realize that what was happening around us, or what had happened around us in the months prior, was affecting me, right? Because it didn't, how do I say this without sounding
It didn't
cold?
In the moment.
It didn't in the moment, and it didn't directly affect what was going on inside of our walls for you, me, and Jade and Alexis. Does that make sense?
No, but yes, it makes sense. But I think that that's where you and I are similar in the fact that, like, when shit hits the fan, we're not crying in the corner and like rocking in a ball, like, oh my God, what do I do? We're like, okay, what do we need to do? Let's go. And like, get it done. You power through it, which is great. And you always need that person. But then once it was done, it was like, close that door and move on. There was no feeling attached to any of those things. So then it just kept getting buried and buried and buried. And eventually it overflowed for both.
No, that was, and I think that you described it perfectly, is that you and I were just whether it be from coaching, people who coached us, or just in our blood, or whatever the case may be, our very unhealthy, and I will say very unhealthy mindset was to be like, nope, you got to fucking deal with it. You got to, that's it. You got to push forward. It's over with. You got to just move on. And it's like, no, that's not. Now it's like, no. That's not the way to deal with it. And I think you and I, me more than anybody in this household, I think, like, that's the first thing I'll say to anybody, right? Because now I believe in therapy and counseling so much that my first thing is like, what happened 10 years ago? Like, I'll just go way back, because I after you going to therapy, after me going to therapy, after both of us doing our own research, I truly believe that, and I wish my mom was here for this one, that a number of things that are going on inside of our head, the way we react to things in our daily lives, at work, in our marriage, with our children, whatever, is a result of what has happened our entire life. One big dramatic event, a few things sprinkled here and there, but you got to deal with that shit. And I think that
Wait,
we both were avoiding it. Yeah, go ahead.
when you were doing the This Is Us episode this week, that was what I was, one of the things that I was saying, that like, even though they grew up in like the safest and loving and open household, they still 20 years later were each dealing with their own past drama, even though they grew up in a household that looked close to perfection,
Did
with
you hear me
parents
say
that we would want to emulate.
But did you hear me say that to Richard and Renee on the podcast? That's the one thing that I realized watching that show, is that if anybody, one of the main things everybody should take away from This Is Us is that if you just talk about shit a lot sooner. If you say that something is sitting on your chest, you can avoid years of BS. And the one thing that sticks out to me is, was it Kevin? He's the brother, and Randall.
Yeah.
When they had dinner, and Kevin was like, well, he's like, just got replaced by another black guy again, right? And then they started arguing about it. And now all these years later, he's talking about how he felt like mom favorited him. Like, dude, if you had just told mom that years ago, or told me that years ago, or told me, mom and dad, that years ago, we could have had a conversation and like dusted this off years ago. But you see that happens a lot throughout the show. It's just people not dealing with shit in the moment. And I know we're kind of getting off on a tangent here, but it's like, but it does pertain to you and I. Like, we were both hanging on to things and not having conversations that we could have had years prior. Because to anybody who's listening, like, our marriage, no bullshit, it took us, like, what you see and hear from us today, that took us like a solid 2 or 3 years to get steady, at the very least, before we even got healthy. Would you agree? Like, no one's saying this is an overnight process. Like, it can take a long fucking time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it was not an overnight thing. It still isn't an overnight thing.
No,
like,
yeah.
We were having an argument an hour ago. Like, but that could have rolled into
all night,
and then all night leads to 6 years thrown back in the pot. Everything's on the table now because you're already going.
But tell everybody how it really would have been. Tomorrow would have been like, fucking didn't work out because, you had to start an argument last night.
Right.
And then I forgot my meal prep and the kid in the fridge because you started an argument last night.
Right. Then there goes the downhill spiral.
And then I was just done for like, and tell everybody, I was done for like a couple of days, a week sometimes, just done, just all fucked up. Couldn't get back on track.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it was bad. It was really, really bad. So we're talking about the negatives and all that fun shit about what happened. I'm going to throw a potential what if into the mixer and get your opinion. What do you think would have happened if you and I had opted for marriage counseling as opposed to seeking therapists on our own to deal with ourselves?
Wouldn't have worked.
I agree, but what are your thoughts on it?
It wouldn't have worked because I'm gonna put ownership on you. You had a lot of work to do on yourself before we could
100%.
even get there. And a lot of that, see, what had happened was
What had happened
you,
was
because I was the closest person to you, because I was someone that ultimately you felt safe and comfortable with, I took the brunt of a lot of your feelings and emotions, even if they weren't directed at me. Like, and I said this to you before, I could pinpoint to the hour when you had an argument with your mom, because then you would start arguing with me. You know what I mean? Like, it had nothing to do with me, but you had all this ball of energy over here, and then it got dumped on me because I'm the person laying next to you in bed.
No. Tell people how bad. Like, it wasn't even me saying anything. It was just like stiff, static, poisonous energy, and it just was like it filled the room.
It was bad. And I don't think that you could have ever been open to the part of therapy, couples therapy, where you have to listen. I think that you were just too much in your own self to even be able to recognize somebody else's feelings. And then through in a professional development that I had, woman came in, Jessica Minahan, who was describing, she's great.
Like, as an individual.
Who was describing how kids had poor behavior and were always behavior issues in school, and they're always the ones that are getting in trouble and always getting the ones in trouble. But what it really boiled down to was anxiety, and it's a whole big thing. Like, we could do a whole nother 7 podcasts on that. But the let's say the symptoms, if you will, that she was describing, I was like, oh my God, it's Ryan. He has anxiety. That's what he has. He doesn't have anger management issues. He doesn't have bipolar. He has anxiety. That's what he has. He overthinks. He acts out. So I think that was also a big turning point in you recognizing really how to control what you had, because you were actually able to name what you had.
Without taking up 10 minutes, why don't you summarize for everybody the plane trip from door to door to get to Florida? I was a wreck, like a small dog in a large car on I-95, anxiety wreck.
Or just driving on I-95 in general. But the plane ride, okay, so people have phobias and things, plane's yours. But then that was exacerbated with anxiety, where I'm a very organized person. I'm comfortable with flying. It's not my favorite thing, but I'm comfortable with flying. We had 2 children with us. And so I was in charge of 4 people, making sure everyone had their tickets and X, Y, and Z. I had it all to go. And you could not stop moving. You could not stop fidgeting. This is before we get on the plane. You could not, like, you're picking up this bag, you're yelling at this person, not other people, just me, like, but you're yelling at me and Alexis and just trying to order us around, but you had no idea what you were even talking about. Like, you could have been talking another language, because the things that you were saying made absolutely no sense. And so we're trying to print out the tickets, and then you're starting to touch things, which now my OCD is going off the charts, because I have it all down. I have it organized. I don't need you at all right now. I just need you to stay in that corner over there. We get up, you were okay in the lobby, whatever. We get on the plane, and the poor, at the time, what was she, 13-year-old, brought schoolwork to do with her, because we went in February. Figured, I'll do it on the plane, like, nice, good student that she was. She goes and pulls it all out, and you tell her, put it away. What? And she's looking at you like you're a crazy person. Why? People are trying to fly. Like, what? I was like,
I dead ass said that too. I really said that.
What did you just say? I'm like, her doing homework is impeding on
she
0
kept
people
bumping
here.
into me, and this is, and for everybody who's watching, this is me on an airplane. Watch.
Yes.
If I have to pee, I'm holding it till I get there. I'm not getting up on an airplane. I don't like people next to me bumping into me. I'm not good with flying. Never have been. I don't know how I made it to France and back, but I am not good with flying. So
wait, well, you know what's even better?
What?
Tell people about the evolution of your recliner chairs.
Oh. So if anybody wants to know, like, yeah, like some shit, I can't even believe that I did it. So
Doesn't make
Monica,
sense.
yeah, it didn't make sense. Monica and I went to go see Jurassic World. She wanted to be a nice new girlfriend because we just started dating. She knew I loved the movie. She takes me. This was me at Jurassic World.
This is when the recliner chairs were new. And I was
So
like, this is great.
So Monica literally jumps over me trying to recline my chair, and I was like, "No, no, get off me!" And she's like, I'm never fucking going to a movie with you again." All right, like I like weird shit. Like I wouldn't recline in the movie theaters. Like I had really weird, bad anxiety. I wasted a lot of time not enjoying life, and now this is me at the movie theater.
Now every chair in our house reclines.
Oh yeah, and now every chair in our house reclines, even the dinner table. Oh wait, we don't have a kitchen anymore. No, but yeah, I had some really like I don't know like if people understand like how bad my anxiety was. And I think that we could even say that I had social anxiety and people can be like, what the fuck, dude? You work in hotels, like
Yes.
you wheel and deal like it's nobody's business.
A lot of
Then I
people
get home.
didn't understand that.
Then I get home. And remember, the excuse used to be, well, I talk to people all day. I don't feel like talking when I get home, which wasn't the case. I just had overwhelming, stupid anxieties.
And that would be even with a room full of people that you've known all your life. Like
No, my whole life, yeah.
You would sit, and I'm guessing Greg had that type of anxiety too, because the two of you would sit in the corner like little schoolgirls and just like talk to each other at any family function that there was.
Yeah, I agree.
Nobody else. You didn't talk to anybody else.
I agree. Greg and I would talk about that sort of anything. So,
speaking of that, so I made the mention that. So here are the things that you're doing, right? Like you're these crazy whacked out things, and I'm processing them myself. But to turn to a friend and be like, "This is what's happening," then I'm just making you sound crazier and crazier to all these other people when my gut tells me like there's something else underneath, right? There's this person, he's there. I just need to get him out, But having a therapist where I could have turned to who has no stake in the game about our relationship to say, let me tell you this recliner story, and she'd be like, all right, well, it's a little strange, rather than like going to a friend and being like, is this crazy? And they're like, yeah, that's crazy, you better get out now. Like, so having a therapist was a safer solution to those things as I process them myself.
No, I agree. But one thing I want to make very clear, and I hope you can back me up on this, because people are going to be like, so when Monica says that she could see the good in me, and I think Monica will jump in right here, right now. Part of the good was that there was never an issue with the kids, right? I always loved the kids, hugged my kids, loved my kids, wanted kids.
The kids were a whole different world for you. Your work was a whole different world for you. So those things didn't bleed into you as a dad or you as an employee or a boss or whatever position you were holding at the time. Those you packed those in a nice like gift box and gave the world the best part of you when it comes to dad and employee, and then saved all the ugliness for me, but
for lack of better terms.
Yeah. So it was something that you channeled back into areas where you would kind of unleash those feelings. And who knows, like maybe if we didn't live together or something, like I wouldn't have seen as much as that. Maybe it wouldn't have been so prevalent in our relationship, but it was, and that's what we went through. So, I mean, I have to say, like, it was a long, hard road that not many people are going to ever understand because they weren't here with us in the every bits and pieces of it, or maybe didn't understand my motives or your motives or what have you. But I am extremely grateful that you have put the work in so that as a person as a whole, and you're not just packaging the good parts of you for this person or that person, that you're as a whole equaling out your feelings and your emotions so that they're done expressed in a healthy way for everyone. Makes everything feel lighter. I mean, everyone feels lighter. Every day feels lighter and more productive and safe and loving. And that was the thing. I never felt like you didn't love me. I just felt like you had so many black clouds that you were under that you couldn't consistently be stable. And now you can.
I would agree with that. So I would agree with that, and I want to make a few. I want to leave a few examples or lay out a few examples as we get towards the end because I think it might help others understand where one another are coming from and if they need to maybe talk to one another or seek therapy as individuals together, whatever they want to do to work on things if that's what they need to do. Let's go back to the beginning where you and I would collide and now years later after doing therapy on our own understand. And the first example I'm going to use, and to anybody who's listening, I'm sorry if you get offended. Our first Christmas, when my anxiety, I wanted to run out the door without saying goodbye. And you got very upset and stopped me because one, it would have been rude, right? But you said that your family would see it a certain way. And then that mentality about your family seeing me a certain way and you having that fear fueled my anxiety to the point that arguments were happening. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So I think to anybody who could follow that little zigzag that we just did there, we're talking about when we're talking about 6 years later when her and I talked after we both started seeking counseling and getting better. It's like, oh, this is why you did that. Like her, like Monica, like she'll say, like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's kind of why I did that. Or me, like, oh, this is why you did that. That's why you reacted that way. And it's like, yeah, like it looks like I did. So I guess the point I'm trying to make in short is that if your partner is doing something to that extent where it's affecting your social lives, like with families or friends or what have you, or they're reacting a certain way to something, or they're quiet and they've been quiet for a few weeks or a few months, it's really not the time to get angry and upset because ask Monica, she knows better than anybody. Like that's the most frustrating phase when that person won't be like, yeah, this is what's going on, or and it just bleeds and bleeds and bleeds, and then that person's miserable, and both people are miserable because the person who's being affected won't speak up, and to the person who's listening who is not speaking up and possibly causing the problem, figure out what you got to do. Like maybe you do need to go seek therapy, which is perfectly fine. Maybe you need to just say it to your spouse, and that's one thing that we didn't even get to talk about, which is a whole another podcast about how you and I are at this point in our marriage after years of arguing, years of counseling. Now we're at this point where it's like, just say it. And we just say, and then it's like, okay, it's done. We're over with. This is where you stand. This is where I stand. This is what you need as an individual. This is what I can give you as an individual. This is where I stand. And the communication just flows as opposed to that stiff, static anger where people are just passing each other. And it's like, I'm fine. I'm fine. It's like, no, you're not fucking fine. And it's affecting everything else that's going on in our lives. Like just talk about what's going on sooner than later. So again, that long-winded summary of what I just said is we're talking about some things that cause arguments between Monica and I 6 years ago. Here we are 6 years later being like, oh, that's why that happened. And going back to what we said about This Is Us, like talk about that shit sooner. Like don't be afraid to do it.
Well, 2 points to that is I learned not to fight fire with fire.
Oh yeah. It's all, and then it's not even talking, it's all emotion. That's Chaco. I didn't steal that line. Or I did steal that line.
There's nothing good that's coming out of fighting fire with fire. Nothing good has come out of it. And then the second bullet point to that would be the number one problem in any relationship, whether it be a marriage or a parent and son or daughter or siblings or friendship, is lack of communication.
Definitely.
So if you always keep that at the forefront of like, and I talked about this yesterday with my therapist, like just just do it. And if it fails, then you try again. And if it fails again, then that part is just not going to happen. But now
And
So
that's the thing in life, right? Like, what's the worst that's going to happen? What's the
right,
absolute worst that's going to happen?
right. Hmm.
Yeah, communication. Just fucking say it. Just say it. Just do it. Just do it. Like Nike. Just do
All
it.
right, Nike. You're cheating on Under Armour.
Yeah, well, Under Armour doesn't really have a slogan. Oh wait, it used to be like "We must protect this house," and then
Hmm.
you did all that fun stuff. So that's where, as we get to the end of things, so let's start summarizing it. Yeah, so I mean, if we hadn't said it already, working on ourselves. This is the summary. Working on ourselves separately benefited us as individuals, and it certainly benefited our marriage. Now, we're not saying that the way we did things is the be all end all. This is the only way that we did it. What we're saying is that from people, and listen, we're just giving everybody the very tip of the iceberg. Like, we're not here to gloat or look for sympathy or anything like that, but we as a couple have been through some shit in the time that we've known each other. That's all we're going to say. And if you know us, you know what we've been through. And there was, I don't want to say, yeah, I'll say it. There was reasons for us to be upset. And we did not address it the right way anytime anything came around. We thought we did, right? Because we hugged one another, we were there for one another, but we weren't dealing with the aftermath, which is what really gets you all jarred up and screws up your emotions and all that stuff. But yeah, we found that working on ourselves individually, talking to somebody else, talking about what's going on inside our heads and how we feel, a professional was able to help us navigate those things so that we could get better as individuals and in turn meet in the middle and make our marriage work. Would you agree to that?
Yes, and it was separate individuals. It wasn't the same individual who worked on us individually. You know what I mean? Like, I think that it's important that you have somebody that meets your style. I had somebody that meets my style. Like, we throw in a little Real Housewives Bravo joke here and there. Like, we have things in common as women, as moms, that as you've come to realize in more recent years, like there are things that you just never realized about women and moms. And so it's nice to have somebody who can recognize those things. And then you have somebody who recognizes things or has known you and your progression over years' time. So it's not the one person who meets with us separately. I think that's kind of important too. Although if you have somebody that's able to stay neutral and in the middle, I don't see a problem with that. But the point of it being individual journeys where you and I haven't sat down together with a counselor.
I was actually going to ask you to make that to make that point. We have never sat down with a therapist or counselor together. It hasn't happened yet, and we're not opposed to it. Just so everybody knows, we're not saying that that's not the way to go. We're just saying that this is what worked for us, and we have yet to actually. I
Feel
don't
the
know if we'll
need.
ever. Yeah, and I don't know that we will get. We're hopefully we have a very long time ahead of us, and we may be like, listen, we got to try something new. Like we work with our counselors individuals. We have to go see this person together as a couple. That time may come. We don't know.
I have a question.
Hopefully it doesn't. Yeah, go ahead.
You know how people struggle with getting their partner to go to a marriage counselor? Like one person in the relationship wants to go, and the other one's like, "Oh hell no, I'm not going to a counselor." Right? So maybe that's that one singular person decides to go on and make their journey individually, and that other person never decides to do that. Like, how do you handle that for the people
I
that are
think
wondering?
again, I don't know. Well, first off, I'll just reiterate so that we don't get sued. Monica and I are not therapists, doctors, or anything of this sort. As somebody who buries himself in self help books and goes to counseling and sees a therapist, that's right. I see two different people, a psychiatrist and a counselor. I think if somebody was opposed to it, that person who made the suggestion, if they're the one that really is looking for help, it's not about what you say, it's how you say it. you can't allow yourself to get upset that your partner or whoever does not want to go. It's okay. Then what do you think we should do? Right? Very gently, because maybe there's some tension. That's why you're suggesting that we go to a counselor anyway. But I guess from experience, you and I could both say, if it's like, well, why the fuck not? Then it's like, well, here's why the fuck not. And blah, everything just it gets blown out of proportion, right? Approach it gently. If it doesn't work, leave it alone. Come back to it another time, right? Come back to it
I thought
another
the
time.
answer you were going to give me, although I liked your answer, was it comes in your extreme ownership mind. It comes down to your extreme ownership. So if you want to work on you, you go do you and take extreme ownership over your own actions. At least worry about yourself. I don't know if that other piece would ever fall in or
Well,
not.
I personally believe that you have to build yourself brick by brick, and that might sound kind of cliche, but what I mean by that is I don't know if you remember this, and you might. Well, you don't remember anything, but you might remember when I said discipline doesn't or anger doesn't get a choice.
Yeah, I
That
do.
was Jocko,
No,
and
it
I
wasn't
didn't. And
because
I
you didn't
didn't.
know him
And I
then.
did. I did, and I didn't listen to him then. So the point I'm trying to make is that I had to do a lot more work on myself to be willing to take on Jocko's advice, lifestyle, and not his lifestyle, like I'm not a SEAL, but his advice, and apply it to my life personally. And I'm not trying to gloat or anything like that. I feel like in order to take on Jocko's advice of extreme ownership and stuff like that, you have to be at a expert level, expert in yourself. Does that make sense? It is not beginner level shit. Like maybe it is, right? But in my opinion, to own up to every single thing, to develop the mindset that everything that goes wrong may be your fault in one way or another, and if not your fault, you have to own up to your position in the situation. That is work that needs to be done over time. Does that make sense? Like, because
Hmm.
if you had told me that like 6 years ago, I would have been like, well, what about her, right? Yeah, like, what about what they do, right? You have to get to a certain spot in your own work to be able to take on something as serious as taking ownership in every single fucking thing that comes your way, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Does it make sense? Tell me if it
Yeah,
doesn't.
it does.
So, yes. So, extreme ownership, taking responsibility, that can be as simple as it sounds. Extreme ownership, taking responsibility, that can be expert level stuff. That comes at, in my opinion, that comes after starting the process on yourself with a counselor or a therapist or a friend or a book or whatever the case may be. Meditating, right? If it works for you. But taking ownership all the time when you need to, that is a very difficult thing to do.
I agree.
Yeah. So, do you have any final thoughts for our fans?
Final thoughts are you don't have to throw in the towel. There
No, don't
is,
throw in the towel. Yeah.
yeah, there's always a way. It's just finding the way that might start with you, not as a couple. So think about yourself and what you can do to better yourself in general, but in that relationship as well. And that could be done by seeking out the advice of a therapist who is a neutral, non-biased party in the situation, where you can feel safe saying whatever craziness you want to say and have them work through your thoughts and emotions so that you can better understand yourself and how you are working through a relationship, whether that be marriage, as we're talking here, or any other kind.
Awesome. I love it. And then my final thoughts for everybody here will be pretty much what Monica said. And in addition, I think we've all heard the term you have to put the oxygen mask on yourself first. And I think that's so true. And people always say, especially parents and especially moms, and before I get attacked by moms, be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I think if you ask Monica, I Monica has helped me see how moms think, and I totally respect the way moms think, and I understand that's differently now. The point I'm trying to make is that Monica also knows that I'll say to her all the time, like, well, you do it to yourself sometimes, baby. You do it to yourself sometimes. You really have to remember that you have to put the oxygen mask on yourself first, whether it be your kids, your marriage, your at work, or whatever. If you're not doing what you want to do, or what you need to do to get better. And when I say what you want to do to get better, is you need to go out once every 2 weeks, every week, whatever the case may be. You need to go to the gym 4 or 5 days a week, and your partner understands that. Or for your marriage, you need to start owning up. You need to start working on things. Like, you have to put the oxygen mask on yourself first. It can't be okay. Well, I have to get this report done. I have to. It has to be in by Friday. Slow the fuck down, right? If you're already a mess, you have to figure out what you can do to get your head centered and get everything back to normal. I don't have time to go to a therapist. I'm just so busy. Okay, we're all busy. Can you spare 30 minutes? Can you tell a therapist I can't do an hour, I can only do 30 minutes, and this is the day I can do it? There's plenty of therapists out there, and especially in this day and age, like Monica said, there's 101 ways to get therapy without leaving your house. So there's never been a better time to start addressing your mental health if that's what you feel you need to do. So long-winded as always. Final thoughts from Ryan are: put the oxygen mask on yourself. The kids can wait. Put on the TV, give them some snacks. You might be like, whoa, that's bad advice. Buy time. Buy time. Buy the time that you need. Do what you need to do to get the oxygen mask onto yourself and get everything squared away. And you might be like, well, what does that have to do with my marriage and this and that? It's a chain reaction. And if you're not taking care of yourself, like I wasn't
Ripple
taking care of
effect.
myself, yeah, ripple effect. If you're not taking care of yourself, like I wasn't taking care of myself, I don't see things getting better, but that's just me. So, yes, that's my final thought. Put the oxygen mask on yourselves, moms and dad, husbands and wives. Put the oxygen mask on yourself first. Well, I think that's it. Did you have a good time?
Great time.
Excellent. I'll see you in a few minutes. To everybody who tuned in, we'll see you next time. Take care.